chance. Tomas hurdles in. He scores! What a goal! He's from Carey Price and then the bar. Are you kidding me?
You must be kidding me.
Did you just do that, Alexander Barkov?
What a stop by Lundqvist! What a goal! It doesn't get any better than this.
Welcome back to the Fantasy Hockey Podcast. The regular season is underway, which means we are back to our normal schedule. I'm your host, Gamby, with my co-host, Brandon, as always, and we are amped to finally get into our regular season content. So this is your week preview, week review, injury report, all the good stuff that we normally do in season. So let's go over really quick here how the show will go, just so you have a primer on what to expect in this episode. First, we have Grammar School, where we correct any mispronunciations we had throughout I guess this time, the off season.
Oh,
normally
there's way
just in
more
any
than we
episode.
actually put in there, but we'll take a couple that we remember and move on.
We'll start adding as the season goes, and then we go into a week review, which this week is kind of like a half a week review where we just kind of go over who surprised us, what's kind of the headlines, that sort of thing. Very brief. Then we go into an injury report, kind of go over all the injuries, when they should be back, that kind of thing. We give you some long-term targets, so who's emerging as someone that you could pick up and hold on to for the rest of the season. Then we go into a week preview. It's more like a schedule preview. We'll give you teams who play 4 or more games, 2 or less games, and then teams that play off nights. So those are the teams you should be targeting to maximize your schedule. And then based on that, we give you short-term targets who we're eyeing mostly for just this week and will be most likely drop candidates at the end of the week. Let's move into the week review. So my number one here is going to be Austin Matthews. 5 goals in 3 games. Wow. I mean, granted, 31% shooting, but still, some of those goals, too, the release was insane.
Yeah, he's been looking really good to start the season, for sure. For me, the first thing to think about right now is just not to panic. I feel like it was the first thing I said last season. I feel like it'll be the first thing I say every season when we do our week previews, or week reviews, or whatever this is to start this off. It's technically a review of the half a week we've had so far, but there's a lot of fear that comes into the first couple of games. You see the player you think's a sleeper do nothing for a game or two, and then you're already thinking, oh, I should drop him, despite the fact you drafted him in like the 8th round or something. Or you'll see a guy that doesn't have proper deployment getting a few points, and it's rushed to the waivers. So keep calm. Yes, there are players to pick up, and we'll discuss them, but not everybody that scored a goal or got 2 assists or whatever is a sustainable pickup option. And you shouldn't be dropping anybody immediately that's had a slump, because there's no slumps yet. Certain teams have played like once. Like the Kings have played 1 game, but and actually everybody on that team did reasonably well for their expectations.
Yeah, well, that's a great example. Dustin Brown. We saw a lot of people saying, "Oh, I'm going to drop Cody Glass for Dustin Brown or whatever." These hot players. And look what happened. Dustin Brown went off, and that was because people dropped him before he even had a chance to show you what he's got. So let things settle. Let things kind of settle out. There's certain situations in which I'll get into this later. I have a good example of someone that I have dropped consistently now for that same player that I've picked up. We're going to talk about him later, though, so I don't want to get into it. But yeah, the moral of the story there is just let things settle quite a bit. Going back to players really quick here, Mika Zibanejad, 8 points in 2 games. All 4 assists of his have been primary assists, which is awesome to see. 40% shooting. Of course, that'll happen when you play a team like Ottawa and have Craig Anderson in net. But nonetheless, Zibanejad is looking like a serious steal. Definitely, I think, one of our top sleepers so far, aside from Dylan Larkin, of course.
Yeah, I mean, Zibanejad is definitely the number one guy right now. There's 8 points in 2 games is just unbelievable. But, of course,
it's absurd.
Honestly, because of how emotional everybody is at the beginning of a season, I'm already seeing crazy trades offered for Zibanejad.
Yep.
So,
or people saying if they should ship him.
If you can get it, I would ship him right now. If somebody's going to pay me way higher than I drafted for him, I would be thinking about it pretty hard. I saw an Eichel for Zibanejad out there, which sounds pretty good to me. There's a bunch of other options that I've seen. His name's just floating around. So I wouldn't intentionally shop him necessarily, but I would listen because people are willing to pay a premium on him already.
I'd listen, but at the same time, kind of how you were saying, I guess, in my opinion, in many leagues, Zibanejad has like top 40 to top 20 potential, depending on how you're set up. Like if you have hits, or if you don't, that sort of thing. It depends on your setup, right? But he is, I think, a top tier guy that was a massive sleeper. So I'd listen. And really, in my opinion, all it is when you're listening is like, let's say you get an Eichel. I think Eichel is, I'm not going to say comparable, like they're similar. I think Eichel is better, of course. And even in fantasy, he has a higher ceiling and all that kind of good stuff. But ultimately, what you're doing is you're just raising your floor, because there's a risk there, of course, that at some point the Rangers kind of go lax and they suck for a while. Whereas with Eichel, you kind of know what you're getting in him. Not to say you don't in Zibanejad, because he played really well last year. But still, I agree. I'd listen, but I wouldn't force a trade just because he's hot. Like I wouldn't say, oh my God, I'm trading him and I'm getting great value just because he's hot. Like, make sure you're getting, like, I would aim for the sky with Zibanejad. If with guys like this, I aim for the sky. If I don't get it, I'm totally happy to hold on. Yeah, exactly. The deal that was floated actually was, it was a situation where the GM could keep Zibanejad for this and next year at a $10 salary essentially, or they could deal him for Eichel, but they wouldn't be able to keep him. And if he didn't keep Eichel, the other keeper was going to be Forsberg at $18. And I was like, there's no comparison there. Like you're not getting enough of a bump with Eichel for this season to make up for the lack of getting such a cheap Zibanejad next season, who should still be very good. Yep. So I think the first thing I want to mention going in with don't panic is I would be careful with guys like Ilya Mikheyev. Yes, I think. We grammar school already, but he actually comes up here because he's been putting points up, but not with proper deployment. And there's a lot of things that suggest it's not going to be backed up. Along those same lines, I think Ville Heinola. Oh my God, I hope I'm saying that right. Heinola? I think it's Heinola. Heinola? Okay. And Heinola. And Neil Pionk, both from the Jets, are doing a little too much right now. I think I actually like Pionk to some extent, and I'll go into that a little bit more later, but don't expect him to be putting up like a 40-point pace. I know right now he's technically putting up an 82-point pace, but let's be real, right? But I think that just temper expectations with everything that's going on so far. I've seen so many people asking about dropping for Pionk, dropping for Mikheyev, dropping for Heinola, including some other podcasts suggesting that Heinola is going to break out and all this. If you're in a super deep league and you have this flexibility, that's fine. It's the more shallow leagues that really need to be careful about dropping a high floor defenseman for a complete gamble at this point. Yeah, or a high floor anybody for a complete gamble at this point. Again, this is all part of what these episodes are for, but you're going to be, in that same vein, looking for sustainable breakouts in good positions. So the opposite of the Mikheyevs, the Pionks, the Heinolas, you've got guys like Victor Olofsson, you've got Alexander Nylander to a lesser extent. There's certain players that are positioned to do well. They're positioned in top 6 roles and top power play. And that's what you want to see, getting decent, at least ice time. Those are the guys that you should be thinking about. Maybe this guy is actually worth picking up right now and not waiting on. One other thing that I thought was interesting with this to review at the beginning of the week, the Leafs lead the league in power play opportunities, which is hilarious. I mean, yes, they have one more game played, but they're already at 15, which is a lot in 3 games. And they're converting at 40%, largely thanks to Austin Matthews, of course. But it's nice to see, right? Leafs are always at the bottom of the league for power play opportunities. Hopefully this is a sign of good things for them, as if there's anything that's held back the top guns from Toronto from being like first round lock picks, it's been power play points. So good to see, I guess, even though I don't have a lot of exposure to them. All right, I'll walk us right into the injury report since I've got it out here. There's not a lot to talk about, which is understandable considering the season is just starting. But there are a few interesting names here. First one is Andreas Athanasiou. We don't really know what's going on with him. He's day-to-day, undisclosed so far. He could be back at any moment. And with the injury report, I'm only going to name players that are fairly fantasy relevant. If there's something like 20% or lower owned on Yahoo, they're probably not going to make this list, just for time constraints and for the fact that most people won't even know who they are. But all right, next up, we've got Corey Schneider, who is maybe day-to-day. Apparently it was cramps. I don't know. With Corey Schneider, there's always that risk of injury, and the fact that this is already happening so early is concerning, to say the least. But apparently he's okay, so we'll just take that at face for now.
Next up, we've got Braden Point, who was supposed to be out till the end of October. Then they kind of said, oh, he might start the season. And then they were like, nah. And so now it looks like he's going to be back sometime this week, missing the weekend, but we're at the end of the weekend as it is. So he will probably miss Sunday, which you probably won't even hear this before then, so it doesn't really matter. But he should be back sometime in this coming week, according to the team, but we'll see. Next up, Adam Larson broke his fibula. Ouch. That is a big bone. Doesn't feel good to break that. Or fibia, not fibula, fibia.
Do you have experience with that?
No, but didn't it happen to that was the same bone that Stamkos broke, wasn't it?
I think so. Tibia? That one was gnarly.
Yeah. So
I can't believe he played on it.
So they're giving Adam Larson a 6 to 8 week timetable, which sounds. I've broken a toe and it took me longer than that to recover. So I'm surprised.
You are also not a professional.
I'm not
athlete,
a professional
sir.
athlete, and I would not play on an injury. And by play, I mean walk or not complain. So 6 to 8 weeks. That's crazy to me. Hockey players are insane. Next up, Evgeny Malkin. Day to day, we don't know yet. The video didn't look like much at a glance. I didn't dig into it too much. It looked like he was knocked into the boards at a little bit of an awkward angle, but I don't know. I mean, anytime you see that, it could wind up being something weird, like a rib or a shoulder or whatever. And with Malkin, again, he's another guy that seems to take a decent amount of injury time every single season. But if you're a Malkin owner, you'd rather have it happen now than during playoffs. Next up, Sam Steele. This guy is a little low owned, but considering he's got a bit of hype coming into the season, I figure his name is probably out there. He's day to day right now. Looked like he was going to continue to be able to play, and apparently not. He's got some sort of mid-body injury. And then lastly, another player that's not really owned, but because of his injury is shaking things up, and that's Brian Little, who's day to day with a concussion. That has moved Andrew Kopp, which I didn't see coming, into the second line center role. I thought for sure it was going to be Roslovic. Oh, I got somebody came at me for saying that wrong too. Roslovic. That's why. Jack Roslovic. That's why. Emphasis. I thought he was going to get the second line center role. Didn't happen. Kopp is there. I do think there is a chance we see Roslovic move in there. Could be interesting if that happens. Otherwise, he's just another third line guy.
Yep.
And that'll do it. That is it for the injury report. How about you take us into your long-term targets?
Well done, Doctor. Thank you for sharing with us that you are not indeed a professional athlete. Moving into long-term targets, I've got one of the hottest names at the top of my list. Now, I bet you this guy, you are wondering, should I grab him? Should I not? I'm buying in, and that's Victor Olofsson.
Yep. Definitely.
On Buffalo. Left wing, right wing, 29% owned. He's top line, top power play. The dude is a beast. He has 3 points so far in 2 games played, playing around 18 minutes and 33 seconds a game on average, something like that. He's played 72% of the Buffalo Sabres power play time. So he's been on the power play a ton. And I mean, yesterday when they won, was it 7-2 or something like that? Was it 272 games? Well, they scored 7 goals. That's all I remember. But he's factored into 2 of those power play points. And so that's been really good for him. They were both power play goals, shooting at 50% on the power play, but take that with a grain of salt. Very healthy offensive zone start percentages. Of all the guys on this list, I think he's the one that is most primed for success long term.
And the ship is sailing already. Like, he's jumping in ownership. You're not the second you listen to this, if you're interested at all in getting a new winger, you have to get him right now, or you will not get him.
Yes, you need to go look. So, for example, I swapped him with Jason Zucker.
I swapped him with Zach Parise. Sorry, Wild. Apparently, you're who's going for Olofsson, but
the thing with a guy like Jason Zucker or Zach Parise is it's probably like a last round pick for you, a guy you got at the very, very end that has a nice floor, when really what you're doing with a guy like Olofsson is you're trying to increase your ceiling now. So he has a decent floor. And honestly, at this time of the season, I don't see anyone picking up a Zucker. Like, I don't think I'm going to drop Jason Zucker or Zach Parise and people are going to rush to the wire to pick either one of those up. And so if you have guys like that, then I think it's safe to drop. I don't think it's necessarily safe right now to drop like a Dustin Brown, for example, or
a Jacob Voracek that somebody just asked about in Discord. Literally, while we were recording this, I got a notification that somebody said, should I drop Voracek for Olofsson? No. That's
the thing, right? Is you want to drop them for guys that you got in like the last round. Yep. That's really what you're looking at here. It's not necessarily like guys that you think won't get picked up. And that's a really important distinction, is you're not necessarily looking at it as, oh, I'm going to drop this guy. And you're also thinking about it strategically in the sense of, for example, I think a good example is someone said, I think it was Gusev and Zucker maybe. maybe that was the example we got in Discord. Someone asked about dropping Olofsson, and I said to keep Gusev even though he's playing worse, just because if you drop Gusev, someone will 100% take a flyer on him and stash him to see if he picks it up. Whereas you drop like a Zucker, and no one's going to do that. No one's going to go and stash Zucker for the hope of whatever. And even if you do, Zucker's replaceable. You can replace and find guys like Zucker on the wire. So you got to be strategic about it when you're dropping or adding these guys. But either way, I'm here to tell you, Victor Olofsson's numbers look really healthy. The coach had very promising things to say about him, which to me, I always keep an eye out for that kind of stuff. I know they're intangibles in fantasy, but when a coach publicly gives what's the word here that I'm looking
Endorsement?
for? Yes, when he gives a public endorsement of a player, especially a young player like Olofsson, that makes me think even more highly of the guy and makes me think that what he's doing is sustainable. And so for me, I think the most sustainable guy long term is Victor Olofsson.
I definitely agree. I mean, we both knew that we would both pick the same player here. So typically with these targets, we don't share them and we kind of surprise each other, but we both knew that Olofsson was going to go, so we had to decide who was going to talk about him. But on the other side of that coin, the first one I've got up here is Cody Glass, 17% owned. He's not maybe not an immediate pickup, but somebody that is in a good position, a better position than I thought he was going to be in. There are a couple concerning things going on. His time on ice is too low at 14 and a half minutes, fluctuating between 13 and 15. You want to see that be north of 15, ideally north of 16 at least, for him to be in more shallow leagues. But depending on how deep your league is, he's probably worth a pickup if you're in a deeper league. I actually did pick him up due to the injury to Malkin. He's a short-term play for me, but I think where he's at, he has a potential long-term. He's playing with Mark Stone and Pacioretty. That is a great place to be. And he's on the power play with those same players. So he's going to get some chemistry. He's on the bumper spot, so that might limit his power play points a little bit, but he's in a good position. His shots at 3 over 2 games, not quite enough, but he's a guy to keep an eye on at the very least. And if you're in a bind, if you lost Malkin and you want to take a flyer, he does play 4 games coming up this week. So he's one of these short-term targets that could turn into a long-term target.
Yeah. Should mention that if we're talking about a center, for example, in like a Cody Glass, and you're not in a deep league, like let's say we're talking you're in an 8 or less team league, most likely a guy like Cody Glass is not going to be worth an ad because centers are so deep this year. There's likely a center on your wire that is going to be much better than Glass. For an example, Anze Kopitar is like 60-something% owned, I think. So it's very likely that in like a 6 or 8 person league, like Anze Kopitar is most likely there.
Even like an Andreas,
even in the 10
is like in there, right? He's gonna his floor is way higher than Glass's.
So it really always like when you're looking at, I mean, you know, we've said this a million times now, but when you're looking at players to add them or looking to drop, always also take into account what's on the wire. Don't just automatically go after the hot hand, because sometimes people will go so far into the hot hands that they completely forget that there's other people on the wire that are also good. So always take a look. Don't just go exactly for the person who's getting added the most at that moment. My next guy here that I'm going to go into is another left wing, right wing, and Tyler Bertuzzi at 39% owned. So he's higher than Olofsson, which is surprising to me. But he's skating top line, top power play as we all expected. He skated 19 minutes last game, which is awesome. And yet again, that line is looking unbelievable. That Larkin, Mantha, and Bertuzzi line. And I questioned a little bit. I know I read some beat writers too who kind of questioned what Tyler Bertuzzi's offensive production would be like this year. There was also rumors of them maybe moving him to the second line in a different role. But it seems that they kept that together, and intelligently so. He is crushing it on that top line in one game so far. But in my opinion, Tyler Bertuzzi is another guy that is worth kind of a potential add. I think the problem with Bertuzzi for me is that his points upside is rather low. I know he had a tremendous game, and the end of last season was tremendous. But if you look at what happened before that, it wasn't that impressive.
Right.
And so there is potential there for a slump in Bertuzzi. And that's really my big question mark is we're still, I think the jury is still out on what exactly Bertuzzi's floor is. right? Like we now know his ceiling and how insane he can be, but what is his floor? What do we see for a floor for him? The good sign is that he did play a lot of power play time in this first game, which is much more higher than he did last year. So that's promising. And that's what you like to see. So there are some encouraging signs here for Tyler Bertuzzi, but if you're in a deeper league, especially one with PIMS, a guy like Tyler Bertuzzi is someone you can 100% take a flyer on and just gamble on a high upside early.
Yep. So I'm going to stick with Detroit because we're already there and mention Dennis Cholowski at 4% right now. This is another one of these. He may not be an immediate pickup in a lot of leagues, but as long as he's top power play, and I know he hasn't got a power play point yet, but he is playing with Mantha and Larkin and Bertuzzi on that top power play, and Athanasiou, when he comes back, I think will take over Hiroza's spot. But he's also got a couple concerning things. Low ice time. He's like 5 minutes below what Hronik's playing at. But because of the fact he's got top power play, I like him over Hronik for now. Hronik. I think it was Hronik when I looked it up. And because of that 4% owned, he's available in a lot of leagues, most leagues, 96% of leagues, turns out. And he's getting pretty good offensive zone starts at 100% so far.
At all strengths. It's because of his power play time. He's playing so much power play time. He's getting a ton of offensive zone time. He's being played as an offensive.
He's 52% right now on the power play. So not a crazy amount, but still he's in a good position. And he's been putting up decent peripherals to go with it. Again, we're talking about one game here, right? So I'm kind of stretching here, but 3 shots, 2 hits, and a block. Sure, it's better than nothing. And if I had Hronik, I would probably be swapping for Cholowski and just looking for the winner for now.
Yeah,
which I should have done and did not in a couple of leagues.
And now you missed out.
And now I probably missed out.
Congratulations. Moving on to my last one here is going to be Pavel Buchnevich, right wing, 17% owned, top line, top power play. The problem with him is he has a ton of point upside. Like he could score 30 goals this year. And I don't think that's even that much of a stretch to say that he could reach that because of the team he's on and the players around him. The real problem is he has no peripherals to boot. And so his floor is insanely low on any given night. So say that there's a night where Buchnevich doesn't get you any points, you're pretty screwed because he's probably not going to really get you any shots, not going to get you any hits, not going to get you any blocks. He's not going to really do anything. And so in a points league, in a points only league, he's extremely valuable in my opinion, especially now that he's getting trusted on both top line and top power play. When we did our Rangers preview, and even a little bit later than that, we talked about the fact that Buchnevich was slated to be on the second power play, but now he's on the top. And so there's a lot of promising things there. That top line is clicking like you would have expected because of Panarin and Zibanejad, and Buchnevich is factoring in. He has a ton of chemistry with Zibanejad already, which is good. He doesn't have to adjust to too much. He just has to adjust to Panarin, which isn't exactly hard to do given how good Panarin is. So I recommend him in a points only league or a points league that is very heavy on goals and assists or just points in general. And you don't really need those peripherals. If you're looking for it's just so tough to recommend him in a lot of leagues just because of that floor. His floor is so bad. And that right wing only as well makes it tough.
Yeah. I've got one more that I'm actually pretty interested in, and that's James Neal at 26%. As long as he's playing with McDavid, and especially when he's on that top power play, I really like him. He's not going to be, a point per game player or anything crazy like that, but expecting something like 65 out of him is pretty reasonable. And when you're talking about a guy you're picking up off the waivers, that's great. He's also coming through with pretty decent shot production, pretty decent hit production. He's doing it all at the moment.
Yeah. Although he does not look to be on Connor McDavid's line anymore.
Of course. Anyway, we'll see what Edmonton does. I don't know why they'd pull him off when he came out with 2 goals in the last game playing with McDavid, but weirder things have happened in Edmonton, to say the least. Let's assume that he is going to play on the line. Just keep an eye on the lines as they're tweeted out, or as you see him on Daily Faceoff or Left Wing Locker or whatever you're using. And if he's playing top line, top power play, he's worth an ad for as long as he's doing that, essentially.
Yeah,
that'll wrap up my long-term targets.
Okay, and now let's go with the week preview. So let's start first with the teams with 4 or more games. Those are going to be Los Angeles, Pittsburgh, Vegas, Winnipeg, and Calgary. And then teams with 2 or less, there's actually quite a few here. Vancouver, Philadelphia, Arizona, Chicago, Colorado, Minnesota, Ottawa, Tampa Bay, and then the Rangers have only 1 game in this upcoming week. So definitely another reason to not pick up Buchnevich too quickly, unless you're, of course, in a massive lead. And then for teams that play off nights, it's going to be Buffalo, who plays Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, Los Angeles, who plays Wednesday and Sunday, and then Columbus, who plays Monday and Friday.
Yeah, as if you need another reason to get Olofsson, right?
Seriously. I mean, you get an immediate good week out of him. And then for anyone wondering, there are, of course, teams that play 1 single off night, but for the sake of this discussion, we keep it to 2 or more. That's the qualifiers for you to get into the teams that play off night section. Moving in right to short-term targets, I'll start with my first one here. Somewhat highly owned guy in Dustin Brown, right wing, 44%. In a really good situation, had a great game. With those off nights, it makes it a pretty easy add, and there's upside too. So he's a good long-term target, in my opinion, but especially a good short-term target for this week.
Yeah, he's going with the Kings, actually. So the Kings have, not only do they play Wednesday and Sunday, they also have 4 games total. So if you, I don't remember if it's Tuesday or Thursday that the heavy night they play is, but if you are not full on one of those days, then you're getting 3 starts out of these guys, probably.
Yep.
Which is about as good as you're going to get, right? There's certain times when you get 4 off nights, but they're not completely, not this week. Nobody has 4 off nights this week. So on that note, I actually like 2 second liners from the Kings in Jeff Carter at 6% and Ilya Kovalchuk at 6%. Now, neither one of these are like the sexiest names, and that's why they're on the short-term targets. But as we mentioned, if you can get 3 starts out of these guys, I don't hate it at all. They're both on top power play, which, it's the Kings, so whatever. But they're getting an opportunity. They're not playing a ton of minutes, but I think I expect to see both of them climb slightly from where they're at right now. We got Jeff Carter just below 16 minutes and Kovalchuk just a touch below 15 minutes, but I think both of them are going to go up. And I think that both, like, we've already seen a point out of Kovalchuk, which, again, Kings have played 1 game, so how much are you really going to get into this? It was a power play point, which is good news, and a primary assist at that. So we've seen Carter have really good seasons before. I think his best are behind him, but if you're going to be able to get extra starts out of him this week, I think he's a pretty decent gamble, and just, drop him on Saturday, or actually I think they play Sunday, right? Yeah, so drop him after Sunday, move off him for next week into more short-term streamer options. Carter, of course, I don't know if he has wing eligibility yet. I kind of doubt it, but he is playing wing, so he should get it at some point. And then Kovalchuk being left wing, right wing should give you some flexibility as far as streamers go.
My next one here is going to be Alex Galchenyuk, 42% owned on the Penguins, center left wing. It's a little bit... He's playing top power play, which I like, obviously, and he looked good. He was against Columbus, so it's a little bit of a difficult thing to evaluate. We don't really know exactly what you're getting out of Chucky just yet on a night-to-night basis, but the fact that the Pens play, as many games as they do, that's the key to it. He doesn't have off nights. I think he has 1 single off night, but so it's hard to recommend him for the off nights, but the schedule is really what's big. So if you have room, he's available.
I think they play Tuesday, Thursday, which they're heavy, but you probably have room on one of those days, I would think.
Yeah, you may have room, especially if you have an injury or something like that. You may have room. The problem too, so the one reason I don't like him that much this week is also if Malkin is out longer than expected, then you're getting a worse second line center for him.
Teddy Bluger,
so it might be McCann.
Probably.
Teddy Bluger, sure, I guess. It's not great. It's not a great look. And then on the power play, of course, I don't think it hurts him too much. So you're really kind of banking on hoping the power play does well, but you're not going to get that much out of him. Yeah.
So I got one last one. I already mentioned him briefly in Neil Pionk. He's 11% owned. This is a bangers edition, I think. He's not going to get a ton of shots. I don't expect him to get more shots than we saw last season or anything. He does hit quite a bit, which is why he's part of the reason anyway, is making this list. He also gets a good amount of blocks, not a ton. I think he's over blocking at the moment with 2 a game. I think we're probably going to see more like 1.5, which is good enough. It's enough to make a dent, so to speak. The Jets play 4 times, and especially if you don't have a benched defenseman, then you're going to get 4 starts out of him. So that can help. He's playing an unbelievable 25 and change time on ice right now. which is a lot. He actually played 27 minutes in the last game. So, I mean, that of course went to overtime, so that bumps his numbers up a bit, but they are relying on him, which is sad, honestly, considering he's not a very good defenseman, all things considered, but they need somebody to step up, and right now it seems to be Pionk mostly, and of course Morrissey, who I assume is owned in your league, but he's not going to get a ton of power play time, and when he is on the power play, he's going to be on the second power play unit, which is a massive step down, to say the least. So don't expect a ton out of him, but he could pad some of your stats and possibly get a point or two in there, and that's about as good as you can expect from a defenseman.
Yep. Sticking to the Jets theme here, I'm going to move on to Perreault and Roslovic. 2% for Roslovic, 3% for Perreault. Really, this is just because there's not that many great streaming options this week, simply because there's not that many teams that play off nights, and the guys that are worth it on Buffalo, LA, or Columbus are probably already owned. And so because of that, I'm looking at just who plays 4 games, and one of those are Winnipeg. Crazy high offensive deployment for them. They're playing a ton of offensive minutes, which is good for them. So they're almost like a sneaky offensive fourth-line weapon in a way. They're playing low minutes, but getting really high offense. So in a really deep league, I like it simply because you're banking on a team that's been scoring a lot of goals, and you're banking it on guys who are getting offensive deployment. So they're offensive weapons, and most likely to get points if you're in a league that, for example, only like 3 or 2% owned guys are there. And for that reason, those are my favorites there. But again, I don't really like them that much. It's more so just if you're in a really deep league, that's kind of the guys I'd be looking at. Anyway, so sticking to Brandon's theme as well, I just want to remind people, what Brandon said at the beginning is very important. Be patient and pay attention to deployment, which is a good reason to listen to our episode on Wednesday, which is our Unsustainable Wednesday episode. Pretty much we go over all the different kinds of players that are hot or cold and why they are hot or cold and what to expect from them. Should they be turning around? Should they not? So we go over all the stats for you and kind of try to put it in layman terms of what exactly to expect. Are they actually in a slump? Are they not? And help you to make those hard decisions. Other than that, that is it. That was a good, fun first regular season episode. Brandon is not a professional athlete. Remember that.
Definitely not.
And other than